confident Vladimir Putin could use the big ethnic Russian community here as an excuse to invade. It's a playbook he's used before in Georgia and Ukraine. Would NATO allies risk war with nuclear power Russia to defend this tiny corner of tiny Estonia? It's a question for Estonia's defense minister, Hanno Pevkur.
We have to trust our allies. Also, I'm quite confident that attacking just even the streets of Estonia, this is attacking NATO. And this is the question then for all the 32 members. Are we together or not?
Get up,
Estonia
stand
isn't
up,
taking anything for granted. What it
stand
is
up
doing
for
is
your
getting
rights.
building. And stress testing new benefit on borders with Russia, Australia, leading international treaties.
Cursed.
It's laying mines here as well, and it's investing heavily in drone technology. These are lessons learned from invaded Ukraine. Estonia really hopes it won't happen there. Adler reporting from Estonia. Now, the United Nations has named 2025 as the year of the glacier, a bid to call attention to the importance of the world's ice fields and to the way they're threatened by climate change. Friday is
A hurricane only has easy
warning
cheese,
that
babe.
many of them will not survive this
Some of those
century,
crackers.
putting hundreds of millions of people at
Salt
risk.
up.
Droughts, water shortages, and flooding. Imogen Folks reports from the Swiss Alps. I'm high in the Swiss Alps, 3,300 meters above sea level. People come from all over the world to see these views. Soaring snow-capped peaks and the blue ice of glaciers. But it's a view that's changing. Global warming is causing glaciers to melt at record levels. 273 billion tons of ice is disappearing.
Well, I'd say everything went pretty well today.
Michael Semp, the World Glacier
even a little
Monitoring
brief review.
Service, says we're already feeling the effects.
Can't believe it's
of
10
rising
o'clock,
sea
man.
levels.
Currently, glaciers are contributing
o'clock?
to sea level by about 1 millimeter a year. That sounds nothing.
It kept pretty busy,
right?
though.
But it has a huge impact. Small number, huge impact. Every millimeter of additional sea level rise is going to flood another 200,000 to 300,000 persons every year. Glaciers are also a crucial source of fresh water. They store the winter snow and release it in spring and summer for crops and drinking water. Less ice means disrupted water supplies, flooding and landslides. Sumanda Mishra of the World Meteorological Organization says the consequences will affect us all.
So when there are a lot of floods, for example, happening because of melting of glaciers, the livelihoods are changed. People tend to migrate from one place to another. So it's, when you ask me how many people are actually impacted, it's really everyone.
Every slight increase in the Earth's temperature speeds up the thaw.
You do have
To limit global warming, scientists say most of the glaciers I can see here will be gone by the end of this century. And if that happens, they warn, we will lose so much more than a beautiful view. Imogen Folks in the Swiss Alps. A reminder of the main news. The Israeli government has unanimously voted to dismiss the head of the country's domestic intelligence agency despite angry demonstrations against
Kind of caught one of those things where,
You've been
like,
listening to the newsroom from the
if
BBC
you
World
try to
Service
be more
with me,
active or, say exercise or walk a whole bunch, it just makes it, you want to
Distribution of the BBC
get in
World Service
shape or
in the United
whatever,
States is made possible by American Public
then
Media,
it's the
producer and
game part.
distributor of award-winning public radio content. Engaging audiences, creating meaningful experiences, and fostering conversations. APM, American Public Media, with support from NetSpy, the security solution that global brands use to discover, prioritize, and remediate vulnerabilities so they can protect what matters. At netspy.com.
I was just picturing it too.
Be fully awake to your day with Wisconsin Today.
Hearing new voices and new discoveries about something I never knew existed in Wisconsin.
We like to get out. We don't like to warm a couch. We like to be on the go all the time.
But it's those things that we
my one friend says that he got both of his place.
That we talk
And
about
it's
forever,
pretty good.
and those make the best memories.
Wisconsin Today.
Like the pain's gone. He said the pain is all gone. Stop walking within the day. Like, you know.
Most scientists, most of the time, have away at their research in obscurity.
And he said he could probably run again if he had to.
Your scientists promoting transgender issues.
I was in the lab. I was at the lab meeting, and I started getting
I've only heard good things about it.
And then I literally just Googled my name and I understood,
Well,
how the
they've gotten
confusion,
better,
but it's just
but
not
some
really
people
an
kind of,
accurate representation
some
of
models
what
like my
we
uncle,
do.
When politics meet the individual scientist coming up on Science in
the
Action.
BBC
metal was
News
like
with
leaching
Neil
into his
Nunes.
body, and I guess that
Thousands of
happened
passengers
to
are
other people
facing
too.
severe disruption
Whatever
after a
metal
fire
that
at an
shit was
electrical
made out of
substation
was like
closed Europe's busiest airport.
getting into his
Heathrow in
bloodstream
West
or something.
London is experiencing a significant power
So,
outage
I think that
and
might
will
what
remain
that
shut
might
until
what happened
midnight
to my
on
dad
Friday.
maybe.
really?
The Israeli cabinet has
Yeah.
voted to sack Ronen
I
Bar, the
mean,
head
he
of the
died of
internal
blood
security agency
poisoning.
Shin Bet.
Mm-hmm.
He's been at odds with the prime
And he
minister
had
since the Hamas attacks of 2023.
all
He's
kinds of
also probing claims that top
stuff
government
done,
aides
like
are lobbying on behalf of Qatar. The prime minister denies this. Meanwhile, Israel's
steel,
been expanding
whatever.
its military
Yeah.
operation on the ground in Gaza. The health
Like,
minister there says more than 90 Palestinians were killed on Thursday.
plus he had some
EU
stuff done
leaders
to
have
his
called for
heart.
swift action to free up billions of
But there
euros
is
to spend
something in
on
that
defense.
steel
At the
that he
summit,
was
they backed
reacting to.
relaxing fiscal
Yeah.
rules so European defense
I think my
readiness
uncle had to
be
take like a
ramped up within
medication
the
to
next 5
counteract it,
years. Argentina's
but the
biggest trade
medication was
union has called for
giving
a
him problems too.
24-hour
So it's like they
general
had to
strike in
remove that
April. It
hip
wants an
thing.
emergency rise in pensions
And I don't
and
know
an end to
if they ever,
austerity
because he
measures.
died, but I don't know if they
The
ever
regional governor of Odessa in southern
were able to
Ukraine
do
says the
that.
port city has been subjected to a mass drone attack by Russia. He said 3 people
It's
were injured,
crazy.
buildings had been damaged, and there were
That
some
sucks.
power cuts. A U.S.
Yeah,
judge
I
has
don't
ordered the
know.
Trump administration not to deport an Indian postgraduate academic at Georgetown University. The Homeland
And
Security Department accuses Badr Khan Suri of spreading
are
Hamas
they gonna be
propaganda
able
and
to give
anti-Semitism.
me
The UN has
regular
named
drugs
2025 as the
if
year
I
of the
have
glacier, warning
Sublocade
that
in my
many
system?
glaciers may not survive the century because
Like,
of
what are
climate
they
change.
gonna,
It
you know
says
what I
if
mean?
ice fields melt,
Yeah, I don't know how that would work
hundreds
for
of
major
millions of
surgery like
people
that.
will be put at
Because
risk.
they put you under
BBC
and
News.
Science in Action from
Yeah.
the BBC World Service with me, Roland Pease. The European Space
no one else,
Agency's Euclid Space Telescope
whatever.
has well and truly embarked on its exploration of the
Well, that's
entirety
questions
of the
you'd have to
universe.
ask. You'd
So
probably
what
Google
we
it.
see this week is only a sample
I
of what's
mean,
to come.
It's the start of a journey.
Maybe they could like
Incredible
remove
journey
it
if you consider that
and
we have
like let me
somehow 1
withdraw
week of
and then
observations.
just hook
1 week.
with for
It's
a
only 1
second
week.
and
It's
then
still
hook me
35
up to
terabytes
morphine
of data.
once they
They'll
remove
be
it.
returning with multiples of that over the next few years. Meanwhile, virologists and
I
zoologists
don't
have
know.
returned
I
from
wouldn't mind getting a hip
Antarctica
replacement
with an update of the spread since last year of the deadly
because it's getting
H5N1
worse.
bird flu through colonies there.
We
It's
sampled
gotta get better.
14 different species where we have
You know what I
confirmed
mean?
well, you've had
the
the
worst
X-rays,
scenario.
right?
We have seen avian
You'd probably
flu,
go back to that same doctor,
hyperphagocytic
and then they
almost
would
everywhere.
probably
Not
take another X-ray
unexpected,
to
I'm
see
afraid.
if
The
anything's
details, though,
changed,
to come. Let's start, though, with the continuing
and
upheaval in
go
US
from there, I
scientific
guess.
institutions under the new administration, but from the
See
point
if
of view
it's
of
something you could do
individual researchers
or have done.
impacted by the actions.
At least
First,
inquire.
Kelton Miner, a climate and environment
Maybe
specialist
find
at
out if
Columbia
you'd be a good
University's
candidate.
Data Science Institute, one of hundreds of staff at the university who learned this
Dr.
week that their
Lewis
federal
was
funding has been pulled because of political
I
activism
was
on
like,
the
what should I
campus
do? I don't know
regarding
what to
Israel
do. Or
and
something
Gaza.
like that. He's like,
$400 million
I might
worth of grants has
suggest,
been
I'm
frozen,
suggesting a
including
hip
funds
replacement.
for the National Institutes
And
of
then he was
Health's
on his
Early
way,
Independence
pretty much.
Award Fund, which were helping Kelton to get onto the first rungs
And
of
that
a
was all he
career
said.
in science. Kelton, thanks for
Hip
joining
Well,
us.
replacement,
When
maybe.
did you first learn of this impact through a pretty terse memo from the university
always get a second
administration?
opinion.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And is it okay if I actually read the email out loud, the beginning
Obviously,
of that?
he's not the one
please
doing
do,
the surgery,
It said,
so
Dear Dr. Miner,
if you got referred
late
to, if
Friday
you got
afternoon,
referred by
the
him,
NIH informed us that they were
to the
canceling
hip
a significant
specialist or
portion of our
whatever,
awards. We regret to
orthopedic
confirm you that
surgeons,
the above award
then
is
you'd have
on
to
the
go to
list and has
see
been
them
terminated
because they
effective
specialize
immediately. We understand this may be shocking
in
news
that.
and create unforeseen and
Dr. Lewis,
unprecedented
shit.
challenges for you and your team. So in that moment, it felt
What based on your
darkly
symptoms
surreal
and
and,
X-ray,
to be frank,
at least.
brutally unfair. I mean,
So
no
that's probably what you'd
justification
have
was
to do.
given why my award was singled out
You
and
maybe
placed in the
already
line
have,
of fire among
obviously,
my
you probably
colleagues'
already have
grants.
a referral, right?
And in about 10 days, more than
If
400
he was
NIH grants were canceled at Columbia. And
suggesting
so
that.
this has left
So
me,
what, you just never
reeling
followed
and
through?
contemplating not only my future at the university,
Yeah, I had an
academia,
appointment actually, but
is
it
that
was
your
like
sole source of
appointment
funding?
that
In
was
other
far,
words,
far
are you
away.
effectively jobless at this
Like
point?
months and
Indeed,
months and
my
months
assistant
away.
professor position was slated to begin this
It
month,
wasn't far, far
and
away, like
I still have
travel
not
wise. It
heard
was just
what
NASA,
my
but
status is and
it was like
what the implications are for not only
December,
me
and
but
they
my
said
entire
come in
research lab in the
April or
next
some
5
shit.
years of research that I
Yeah.
have
You know what I
planned
mean?
out.
Like
I describe you as
That's
the
the way it
Climate
is with
and
that
Environment
shit.
Specialist at the Data Science Institute. This is a National
Takes
Institute
forever.
of Health award. What is it that you're hoping to study?
Yeah, so I'm a behavioral
My
data
next dent,
scientist.
I couldn't get
I
in to see
research how
for a
humans
hygienist, the
are
dentist.
adapting to some of
I
the
can get
most
in
prominent
June.
global changes in
So far out there.
what,
technology,
really?
the environment that we live in, and the climate that surrounds us. And my research was going to try to estimate what the behavioral costs and benefits of changes in climate are globally for people's physical activity, sleep, and other health-related behaviors.
I've seen from some of your earlier papers, which I guess are the ones that persuaded the NIH that you should be funded, you've been using mobile phone data to see, for example, if they're going out and about, as you say, whether their sleep patterns are changing.
I mean, I've conducted, global scale research showing that warmer than normal temperatures reduce how much people sleep across the entire year. I've conducted other research that shows, different changes in fundamental behaviors and people's emotions and how they express themselves. On hotter days, it becomes more negative, and when it rains harder, people's sentiment is harmed. I do research across the gambit, though, and it's not, focused on one particular outcome. It's focused more broadly on the determinants of human welfare, well-being, and life satisfaction. And our everyday behaviors are basically just one component of human health, but a very important one.
I mean, I have seen other commentators mocking this research on social media, and it's not the kind of hard atmospheric data that tell us about the state of the climate and so on. I mean, would you defend this kind of science being done? And was this part of the reason why Columbia University or the NIH cut your research?
The stated reason for these grant cancellations was Columbia's purported failure to adequately address repeated anti-Semitic harassment on campus. But the practical effect has been to derail a broad scope of predominantly health-related research, cancer epidemiology, diabetes management, schizophrenia treatment, environmental health, maternal health, and pediatric health, and other aspects of health and medical science have all come to a halt, in many cases leaving patients and those enrolled in clinical trials in limbo, and in some cases derailing the entire research studies themselves. So my research is one component of this, but what has become apparent in the trail of debris of studies that have been canceled and axed is that a large number of them have been environmental health and climate and health related research. And so what's unclear at this point is, where are these decisions coming from? We all deserve to know what were the criteria that were used to select which grants to cancel and which researchers' futures to alter.
I should say the acting president of Columbia University has put out a statement agreeing that anti-Semitism is a problem at the university that needs to be tackled. I need to ask you whether you have been involved in any of these protests on the campus. Have you been a political activist as well as doing your research?
I have not been involved in the on-campus activism and protests. I do want to, emphasize that, if the U.S. claims to be punishing Columbia for allowing what it describes as "quote-unquote" illegal protests and failing to protect students, from "quote-unquote" anti-Semitic harassment on campus,
Oh my God, my
valid
fucking
concerns
knees
and accusations that we should take seriously.
I had knee surgery when I was like
terminating
15
medical,
on this
public,
knee.
and environmental health
And the doctor said, probably when you're about
Kelton, thank
50
you very much
something,
for
you'll probably have to get
Thanks so
another
much for having me
surgery.
on.
Kelton Minor of Columbia University. At the State of the Union address last
So the
month,
doctor was probably right.
several examples of what he called wasteful spending that he was proposing to axe, including this. $8 million for
It was
making mice.
torn cart. It was like torn the menses. It's a cartilage in your knee that they go in
This
there,
is
like,
real. Pushing
cut it.
back against
It was like
accusations the
torn, so
president
my
was
knee would
confusing
lock
transgender
every
with
once in a while.
transgenic, in other words, genetically altered.
So they had
The
to
House
cut
issued
that
a
part out
list
to
of
get it.
NIH-supported
Stop it
projects, which, in their words, were performing transgender experiments on
It
mice,
sucked. It'd
as we
be painful.
highlighted at the
Like my
time.
knee would
The
literally
most
get stuck.
expensive of these was
And if
a
I tried to
study
move it, it
at
would
the
just be so
Indiana
painful, and I'd
University
have
School
to
of
kind of like
Medicine on the role of
work it out or
hormones
whatever, and then
in the development of asthma.
so the
Project
cartilage would
leader
like
Patricia Silvera
sit
had
back.
just learned weeks before
I
that
hate
her
that.
research
I
had
dealt with
been
that for like
listed
a year
on
and
a
a half.
political website questioning gender research,
Oh,
though she missed the presidential address itself.
I was in the lab, I was about to run my lab meeting, and I started getting email after email. And then I literally just Googled my name and the mice, and I saw. I went back and I watched a mini video of what he had said, and I understood, how the confusion about transgenic versus transgender led the White House to clarify what they meant, but it's just not really an accurate representation of what we do.
Most research is done quite quietly, and people are getting on with the job that they've been funded to do, and suddenly to be plucked out of, shall I say, obscurity by this kind of statement from, the most powerful political office almost in the world.
Yeah, it was a little disturbing, and obviously the first thing I went to check is if my grant was still active, because I kept reading in other places that some research had been actually stopped. My grant's still active despite all this confusion, so in a way it's good news, but I don't appreciate the misrepresentation of some of what we do, especially with the general public, because it is taxpayers' money. They trust us to conduct research to provide data that will help everyone, and I wouldn't want anyone to think that we are wasting their money or using it for anything that is negative.
I suppose there is a very loose way in which it could be said you're working with transgender mice, but the work you're doing is so much more serious, and it is about the interaction between hormones and health.
We are interested in how, inside of the cells, how the genes are regulated to provoke inflammation that then later on contributes to asthma. And some of these genes are regulated by hormones. So in order to dissect those mechanisms, we use transgenic mice. So these particular mice, they have a mutation. This mutation makes these animals have either female hormones or male hormones circulating in their blood.
It was
And
like
these
7
mice
o'clock in
could
the
be
morning. I was
genetically
getting all
male
dolled
or
up for
female
school,
in
which I
terms of
always
sex
did.
chromosomes. So they could be
Put
XX,
on
which is the
makeup,
female
like
composition,
hairspray,
or they could be
fucking my
XY,
hair
which
was
is
up
the male
there. You
composition.
know what I mean?
And the
And my
models
dad's
follow
like,
the four core genotypes because you basically have four
he had
options.
brought
You
my
have
sister Jenny
two
to
hormones
school,
and two
or to her
chromosomes.
friend's house, so that
And that
they can catch
allows
the bus
us
together.
to determine, for example, if I
And when he
suspect
was
in my
walking
case
her up
that
to the
asthma
door,
is more prevalent in
he
women
fell on
than
the
men
ice and he
because the
cracked his
hormones
head
are
super
contributing,
hard.
what I do is I dissect
Well,
the
anyways, he had a
mechanism of the
concussion,
hormone alone
but
by
nobody knew
putting
he
it
had
in
a
the context
concussion.
of the chromosomes from
Because
the
he didn't
females
speak
or the
of him
chromosomes from the males,
himself falling.
and then I see the difference
But
between
he
those
sat there
two,
and he kept
and then
going,
I dig deeper
when the
into
fuck do you
what
think
genes
you're
are being
going?
expressed and what
You know,
happens
because I'm
in
getting
the
all
lungs.
dolled up or
So
whatever,
it is
and
a
he
tool
knows I
that I
can do
use.
that for
Now,
school or
when
whatever,
he
you know
thinks
what I
that I
mean?
have
Whatever.
a
But he
chromosomal
thought it was just
composition
like
of the
Friday
female
night
with the hormones of the
or
male,
something,
and
you
vice
know what I mean?
versa,
Like, and he kept
it
saying,
is tempting,
where the fuck do you
perhaps,
think
to
you're
think
going?
that that would be
I'm
a
like, to school,
transgender
Dad.
mouse. However, the word
Oh,
gender
okay.
is
Yeah.
culturally defined.
And then,
Gender
like,
is
a few
a
minutes
social
later, he'd be
construct,
like,
so there could never
where
be
the
a
fuck
null
you
term
think you're
assigned to
going?
gender. To the speaking for the abstract and my
To school,
public health
Dad.
relevance, I mentioned
Oh,
that
yeah.
my goal was to study how these hormones contribute to this mechanism.
And
And I
then
think the way it was written,
he was
it
like,
sounded
yeah,
like I could
fell
help
down pretty good
people who
over
were
at,
transgender,
I
which
can't
is true.
remember her name.
If somebody has the opposite hormone and their asthma gets worse, my
It hit
research
my head
potentially
pretty
could help
good.
them treat their
And my
asthma.
mom was like,
But that's not the
Jesus
only
Christ, you
purpose
gotta
of
go to
this
the
research.
hospital.
In the abstract,
You're acting crazy
something I
because
think
she
it's
was saying
even
something
known
to my
that
mom too, you know
girls
what I mean?
become
I don't know what it
particularly
was,
more
but she
susceptible
started
to
freaking
asthma
out.
during
Like, she
puberty.
started
What we
panicking.
know
Like,
is that after puberty, and throughout
she's like,
reproductive life,
you gotta
there's
go to the
always more
hospital.
women with asthma than men,
You're
almost
not
twice as
acting right.
many. And not only that, women have more severe asthma. They get hospitalized more
Yeah,
for
because he
asthma.
was saying stuff
They
to her
die more
too,
from
like,
asthma. And
Fuck
at
you
that point,
doing?
we believe
I don't
criminal
know,
hormones are
like,
involved. Other
I don't know
hints
what.
that we have regarding hormones participating in these mechanisms is that during pregnancy, some women experience differences in their asthma severity,
I've
and
never had a
also during
concussion, but I've
menopause,
hit
a
my
lot of women resolve their
head a
asthma.
couple times.
So we have a lot of hints regarding, estrogen potentially contributing to the inflammation underlying asthma. But in order to understand what's going on and to be able to treat directly the problem, we need to dissect the mechanism using these tools, including these mice.
I guess what I'm wondering about, though, is what this episode tells us about what happens when science gets seen through a political prism.
Yeah, it is sad to hear that health is being politicized because I think about the patients, I think about the people who receive hormone for a medical treatment or receive hormone because they do want to transition. It's their personal decision. And, they have the right to know if the hormones are going to affect their health. And
I'm tired.
also, they have the right to have
Heck
a
yeah.
treatment if something goes wrong with
Sore
their
and
lungs, at least in
tired.
my case. So yeah,
I feel
I
like I did
don't
a
really
bazillion things
like
today and I
that
didn't even do
this
very
is
much
taken
at
out of
all.
context and making it sound like I'm playing with mice and
You
just
stay busy though.
making them gendered or whatever they think I'm doing. I wake up every day and I go to the lab and I do my work and I train people and I conduct my experiments with the end goal of helping people have a better life and better health.
Patricia Silvera on the experience of being catapulted into a political storm. A reminder, this is Science in Action from the BBC World Service. Normal sciences continuing outside this turmoil. I hope you've had a chance to see some of the amazing new images released by the European Space Agency's Euclid Space Telescope, now a year into its program
Hanging
to
out with
map the
kids.
universe beyond our Milky Way galaxy. The quality of the images gathered by a 600 megapixel camera on the main telescope is stunning. And they reminded me of some of those sent back by the James Webb Space Telescope. But ESA
You're just
astronomer
so
Valeria
boy up.
Petterini told me the
You're
Euclid
not so
telescope
little,
design
I
and
guess,
purpose
but
is very
he's
different.
chubbier
Euclid
kid, but
has a very wide field of view.
that
It
Liv
will
has a
allow to
crush
map
on.
the geometry of the universe
But I
and
guess
thus
he's a
to
little
provide
perv.
a map
Yeah.
of the full
So she
sky
can't hang out with
beyond
him.
our
So.
galactic terrain very fast, relatively in 6 years, and also has a very high resolution.
I mean, the pictures that have come down are absolutely stunning.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We can zoom in and still see very, very tiny details.
At the beginning of my career as a journalist, distant galaxies were just smudges, rather ugly ones at that. Whereas now you can see, for example, with spiral galaxies, you can see the twists and turns of their shapes, and it always feels like you can see individual stars in them.
Indeed, that's one of the highlights of this data release, to see galaxies in their different shapes, how they also change, and their shape and orientation changes, for example, depending on their environment and how close they are to what we call the cosmic web.
What's interesting is typically when we do a story, it will be because astronomers have found out something important, like, I don't know, with James Webb, it would be some of the very earliest black holes or some of the earliest stars and things like this. You've got dozens of papers that you've published, but they all seem to be explanations of catalogues and how we searched for something. The titles are extremely boring, but this is the start of the journey for you.
It's the start of a journey. It's an incredible journey if you consider that we are releasing now 1 week of observations.
It's 1 week.
It's only 1 week. It's still 35 terabytes of data. These data are